Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for the Platformation webinar. This will be an awesome session about empowering your ServiceNow Citizen Developers using automated deployments. And we're excited to have Lamia Sauci today, joined by one of our customers, Sasol, and representing Sasol is Bramley Metza, who will share a great success story about how they empowered their citizen developers with automated deployments. Lamia, why don't we go ahead and get started with the presentation? I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Maria. So welcome, everybody. First, let me tell you a little bit about Platformation. So we are triple award winner this year with 2 global awards for app development and industry solution, which also puts us as the elite partner for ServiceNow. We have global presence within multiple countries and 5 offices around the world, and we provide mainly advisory services, implementation services around ServiceNow, and DevOps services, which we will talk about today, about the service that we have developed for Sasol, and we will be offering for multiple customers. So for today's webinar, I'll be leading in terms of the DevOps story. I am the DevOps competence lead for Platformation. I have been working in the ServiceNow platform within the ITSM, CSM module, and the DevOps module. I have a background in system engineering, telecom engineering, and I'm passionate about nature, like camping and kayaking. And we have with us Bramley from Sasol. Bramley, if you can tell us something about yourself.
Yeah, hey, Lamia, thanks for the opportunity and for the invite. First, let me just say I'm very excited to be here. One, because we have 2 areas that are my personal favorite when it comes to digital transformation journeys, and that's DevOps and citizen development. So as far as what I do for Sasol, I'm a senior manager responsible for DevSecOps and the chapters. I have a background in electrical engineering, software development, and IT consulting. I'm passionate about education, mentorship, and anything disruptive. And when I do have time, I do play golf. Thanks, Lamia.
Thank you, Bramley. So for today, we're going to go through the business challenges that Sasol has been facing regarding citizen developer and how DevOps comes to play in it. We will talk about why now building the solution, what was the solution that was built for Sasol, and briefly demo the solution. And finally, show the outcome that Sasol has been experiencing after the development. So in summary, what is citizen developer is what we're going to learn about today. Why now is it relevant, and what does it play in ServiceNow, and what are the available tools to enable it? Bramley, if you could continue.
Yeah, thanks again. So I'm just going to share some of the challenges that we had at Sasol. And I should just mention that these are common issues for any company that was not born digital. So you will find a big organization that they have an issue with legacy technology stack. Some of the technologies were in place for about 30 years. You'll also find that there is poor access to data and the visibility. And most of these organizations, they have waterfall ways of working. And of course, they are disrupted in the marketplace and they find themselves with shortage of skills. And ultimately what happens is that the business, the actual customer that they're supposed to serve is not happy with the IT organization. In our case, this was the reality. If you move to the next slide.
Yes.
With all these issues, we had to reorganize ourselves as IT. We had to move from the old way where we were organized around technology to organize ourselves in line with business. What that means is that we now organize around what we call portfolios and platforms. And of course, with that, our new ways of working become real. We're adopting DevOps. And what is key in this was also that we had to come up with a vision that speaks to the actual ambition that we want to be, which was to become one with business, to deliver a great value by doing three things. One is making sure that we team better, we adopt or invest in new technology, and we also adopt new ways of working, which is agile. All right, so just with the theme for today is really something that we have learned in SASL, that putting the power to create in the hands of the person who knows the process just makes sense. So what does this actually mean? It meant that for us, we had to look at the new concepts that were coming in the market. And one of those concepts, which is quite a trending concept, is citizen development. Citizen development allows us as SASL to move at what we call customer speed. All right, so what does it mean? And again, it was important for us to make sure that if we're going to adopt citizen development, we have to make sure that we also define what it means for SASL. And it really meant that we get the power of the tools that we have, which are low-code platforms. We give it to the business and making sure that when they do work with these tools, they work within the governance that IT has provided. And again, in this space, you also want to make sure that you define exactly what the citizen development look like, what businesses that person can come from, and also just be clear on the type of space that you want to create. And for us was really just making sure there is that safe place for our business users to experiment and innovate. Thanks, Lemmy. All right, so with that, we also experimented on many tools, which some of them I'm not going to mention here, but certainly you can look at Gartner and look at some of the trending tools. But there was an issue, right? One is we have ServiceNow. We did not see ServiceNow as a contender. And some of the issues that really made this difficult for us to see ServiceNow as a contender was that we had a complex change management process. If you want to release something today at SASL, is that whether it's a simple change on a form or workflow, you'll have to wait anytime between a week and 3 weeks to go through the CAP process to get approval and put that into production. Being an oil and gas company, we are in a regulated environment, and compliance became an issue. And of course, old ways of working did caught up with us. We did not have any CI/CD pipelines in the environment. And as I mentioned, we were stuck with the old version of ServiceNow. Lamia?
Yes, thanks, Bromley. So I can imagine that for some of you, this speech is not something new to hear about. And some of you has been facing the same challenges probably. And let's discuss about what Bromley was saying about it was the old way of working of ServiceNow was not facilitating their journey. Indeed, because with ServiceNow, usually you have multiple development environments. You need to constantly be cloning your environments to make sure that there is consistency through the DTAP stream. You have multiple teams working on it, so you can have multiple practices. There is no standards. You have to follow different processes sometimes. And again, you have the cumbersome manual testing that happens, which is also labor intensive, and sometimes testing is not fully done properly. It's prone to human error. And in the end, when you want to finally deploy it, you spend 20 to 50% of your time managing actually the deployment before even doing it, and without forgetting that all the manual runbooks that have to be added into it. So that leads us actually how the traditional release process in ServiceNow used to be, which we've discussed with Bramley, was a cumbersome way. You start with defining the requirements, and then let me annotate. You start with defining the requirement here, and then you decide to create an update set from it. You make the change that is captured in that update set. Is it captured correctly? If you're lucky, yes, nice. Do I need to group my update sets and merge them into one batch? Then if it is completed, do I have the proper update set source? This is even without having any issues before, that you didn't find any scope application issues in there. Let's say there was no issue faced, you create your update source, you retrieve it in your test instance, you preview it. Then is there any conflicts? If yes, you have to reanalyze, or you have to redo the whole step again from dev to test again. If luckily there's no conflict, we can commit it to the testing and the UAT environment. There the testing starts. Is there anything issue during the manual testing? No. Then we go. If there is, we have to redefine and recreate everything. So let's say finally testing went well, we create the change, and the handover document needs to be associated to the change. The runbook should be defined, and that change goes into the whole approval flow of change management, waiting for the CAB approval, waiting for that meeting, then it gets approved, and then waiting for a change window. Maybe there is a maintenance planned at the same time, and finally it gets deployed, and the value is finally delivered after all these times. This usually takes around a couple of days, maybe even a couple of weeks within companies as large as Sassel. And the issue is that this is captured via update sets, which cannot be automated. It is not based on an automated way of deployment. The testing is not done automatically, obviously. You have to manually do it, and you need human intervention every time and human knowledge to do all these steps. That leads us to the solution, and the solution is fixed by using apps. So basically, for this way, from Orlando onwards, the way of managing changes in ServiceNow platform has been put forward to start using apps. And for that, you capture the changes in a scoped app that is created in the development environment, that gets pushed in the source repo and then pushed in the app repository, and that can get installed into your UAT environments and any other environment. So how is that DevOps, would you say? So this is the DevOps vision. Basically, let's say your citizen developer decides to come forward with an idea that something needs to be changed into the instance. It starts with a story. This story is then built, and it is committed via the app repositories. So that commits into a Git and an app repository. The code is analyzed. It can go through automated testing. It can call the ATFs of ServiceNow, and it gets published into the repository of the app to be uploaded and deployed into your other instances. Before it gets deployed, a change automation is automatically triggered to get change controls and deploy with automatic approvals or with manual approvals, depending multiple options. This will be shown visibly in the demo later. So basically, with this way of working, you solve the key challenge of citizen development. You put your citizen developer in a train, and enable them to deploy changes without the failure and without risking any quality of your instance or any best practice issues. So that's the scene has been set. Let's go into the demo. Here, let me refresh my pages. So we have here 3 instances. Our first instance is SVS 11 as the development instance. Our second instance is this one in blue as our test instance. And our third instance is the 14 as our production instance. So with the use case that I used earlier, our citizen developer had the idea of adding a field, do you agree to a term and condition for a specific record. So let's go to the developer instance. And we have this record opened, this catalog item opened in the catalog builder. And we would like to add this new question. So I would like to show first in production instance, how does this catalog look like? So currently the catalog looks as you see here with those 5 different fields or variables. And we will add with this test the variable that I have just added from the story, do I agree to terms and conditions? Let's go on, insert question. So as a citizen developer, I'll be able to work with the catalog builder and submitting my question after reviewing all the updates that I have done. So here, this is where the citizen developer has had the idea and submitted their change. So now how does it get carried out from the dev instance toward the test instance and then from production and on? Here we have our dev instance. We can see here that we have a studio opened up with the application that we have created called CI/CD Azure POC. And here we see that the catalog builder just got checked out. Perfect. Then in the source control, we can commit the change. While committing the change, it's always best practice to write the story that number and the story that just has been created. Let's call it agreement field. And this is the first step, and the last step that is the manual step to be done throughout this whole process. What we have just done is the implementation that I have just added into the catalog item has been committed into the repository and will be triggering a pipeline, a CI/CD pipeline, and goes through the steps and stages to get it deployed into the following instances. So here for our demo, we have set up the pipeline into an Azure DevOps pipeline. Obviously, this can be done in multiple CI/CD pipelines that are compatible with the ServiceNow DevOps app. And you can see here that the pipeline that I just triggered 23 seconds ago is starting to be built. So what does this view mean is that we have multiple stages of build between build, test, and deploy. And I can understand that for some people, this is a first new look to the Azure DevOps view, but fear not, because ServiceNow has provided a very nice UI, user-friendly UI to have a look at how the pipeline is going within ServiceNow itself. So here you can see a pipeline that I've triggered earlier this morning. As you can understand, it doesn't finish within 2 seconds, but pretty close. It finishes between couple of minutes, as you can see from this past pipeline. So for the time of the demo, I will go through the previous pipeline while the other one is running in the background. So here we have the pipeline. What it happens at the moment is that it triggers the stage build. And in the build stage is it checks the changes that have been done in the dev environment. It runs an ATF test by calling API of the ATFs of ServiceNow. And once that shows at 100%, it pushes the application into the app repository, and that application gets downloaded into the test instance. That's when the build test, the test stage is triggered, and that test stage then installs the application in the test environment and runs the ATFs again. This is a personal choice for our demo to make sure that every time the testing run on both instances is quite consistent and that there is no changes happening in between instances. So the tests here, basically you could set it up as you wish. In this case, we check that there is no coding error. You could also check for conflicts, etc. So once the test goes at 100% correctness, no errors, and everything passed properly, a change is created in the production instance. And here we can see the change that was created in the previous pipeline. So the change is put at category DevOps, which is an out-of-the-box category from the DevOps application. And we have all the planning fields pre-filled based on information from the pipeline, and this can be changed as per your own pipeline, of course. What is interesting in this change is basically the related records at the bottom. So I talked about the test summaries and the test that is triggered, the API test that is triggered before. And basically all the test summaries get carried out from your test instance into the change to show you the passing rate, what has passed, what has failed, and this can be used later for some policies. You can see here also the work item that is related to the change that I just did. So, and that is the story that I linked. And here you can also see the commit that I previously did earlier. So earlier I was talking about the test summaries that you can use in policies. This brings us to one of the most important features of this automated deployment, which is the DevOps change policies. These use the same change policies as used in the ITSM change module, but they are specific to the category DevOps changes. And for these type of changes, we have auto approvals set, for example, if the risk is low and impact is medium. Obviously here, the change that we did is very minimal, so the risk is not going to be high and the test results are not going to give any failure. But let's say in your own cases, depending on the change that you do, you might include in your change policies either the way of how the service is handled, the criticality of that service, how is the test summary giving as a grade, is it passing, does it have 80% pass or less? And that's basically up to you how you would like to configure those changes. So here I'm going back to the pipeline in Azure DevOps, and you can see that the build and the test have completed, and now the production is getting ready to be deployed. So if I refresh this page, which is our user-friendly UI view of the pipeline in ServiceNow, you can see that we have this pipeline that have been triggered 6 minutes ago. I've been talking for 6 minutes. I hope you're not bored by now. So the build has been triggered, the test have been triggered, and the change has been triggered. And you can see also here, it's in the DevOps category, and the change policy that was triggered is a DevOps auto approve, and it has been auto approved by the system user DevOps system. Here again, if you don't want it to be auto-approved, there is possibility to add manual approvals and then call, for example, the process owner based on the criteria that I explained earlier. And also, if there is any conflicts, let's say if your configuration item in this case would be ServiceNow is on freeze at the moment, so there is a scheduling conflict. If that is the case, there will be a conflict here and it will show, and obviously nothing will be moved automatically or deployed automatically. So if I go back to the test instance, we see in the pipeline that in the test instance, the change has been completed and carried on. So this was the record catalog item previously. And if I refresh, you can see that the field has been updated. And if we check here, we can see that it has been also updated in the production instance. So bear in mind, production instance again is the green one. If I refresh, we have underneath urgency, we should have our new field. Do you agree to terms and conditions? And that concludes the demo. So, Bramley, could you tell us a little bit of the demo that I showed and how it's reflected with the work that you had at Sasso?
Yeah, thanks, Lamia. It's great to see things, live. And I see the demo gods today were in agreement with you. So I hope the audience enjoyed it. So in our case, what you're looking at here is actually the real, pipeline that we have, set up for ourselves. So you're looking at, if you still remember the story, the ambition that we had at Sasso is really to move at customer speed, making sure that those 3 weeks and days becomes, seconds and minutes. So how we package the solution is done automatically, moving from one environment to another. And of course, as I said, testing and security at Sasso is very key as we're setting ourselves DevSecOps competency. And moving to production, in this case, we still rely on, a platform owner or service owner. They're given for about an hour to approve. In this case, you can see that it took about 27 minutes to move the solution to production. So end-to-end process complete in under an hour. So great results. If you look at what did we achieve today? So 3 things that are very key for Sasso and certainly for our customer. It is the speed, how fast we package, go through approvals, put the solutions into production. When it comes to quality, and of course, you looking at the quality of the solution as well, but what is key is really making sure that you can measure the quality of collaboration between IT and business owners. And lastly, is stability. And we believe that once the solution has gone through quality checks, it will go into production used by customers and it will be stable. All of this combined, it really results in reduced cost for Sasso. So we are happy with the results. Right, with that said, I need to point this out. It is very easy to set up a citizen development program, but to sustain it, and I've seen in the past three years, to sustain it is a lot of work. I'll pass over here to Lamia just to show us some of the frameworks that they are using. Thank you.
Yes, so we had to use the quote by Bramley as it was eloquently said. And indeed, it's very hard to sustain, and DevOps is not the only block that can be used to enable your citizen development program. And DevOps helps with the automated part, but many blocks can be used, as you can see in this framework, and we enable as platformation as part of our success and implementation solutions. So what are the key takeaways from this webinar as we close to the end before the Q&A session. Citizen Developer can accelerate digital transformation, as we've seen and as we've established as SASL. ServiceNow is a great vehicle to achieve this with this integration capability and all the testing and inclusion of SecDevOps and testing into it. And the tools are now available to provide the speed, quality, and the gradient to basically do it. And that tool is ServiceNow. Thank you for following. And Maria, if you could indulge us.
Yes, thanks, Lamia. That was a great demo. So we're at the Q&A now, and we've received a few questions already, and I'll address them to you both, Bramley and Lamia, and you guys can decide who will take answering it live. So the first one I want to address is how do you do client-side testing in the pipeline? And another one, code scanning. So how do you do client-side testing and code scanning in the pipeline?
Yeah, I'll take the code scanning. Let me, if you can look at the other question. So in our case, we use SonarQube mostly for code scanning. But outside ServiceNow, we have many other tools that we look at, especially from security. We have White Source Bolt that we also use to scan the code.
Yeah. And regarding the client-side testing, I'm assuming here you mean for the end user testing. So the end user testing would stay manual if you want to have it, but here the testing that are triggered here are all automated tests. In our case, it was the ServiceNow ATF tests. So it's called via the APIs. But if you need specific user testing, that is usually manual, that cannot be automated.
I think
I understood the question correctly.
What Chris is adding, it's about indeed the automated testing framework and whether that's offered from outside of ServiceNow. So I think from the pipeline, we can trigger the ATF suites. And of course, for the client-side testing, there needs to be an active test runner, a client test runner active, which can be set up to run independently of a user. So in fact, we can trigger even the client-side ATFs from the CI/CD pipeline outside ServiceNow using the APIs.
Thanks for.
Does that answer your question, Chris? Hopefully it does. And if it doesn't, please follow up with us after, and we can always reach out to you to make sure it did answer your question. Okay, great, awesome. So the next question in the Q&A backlog, which there's quite a bit of, does deployment also address if there are any collisions like errors or warnings? If yes, how does it decide?
In terms of, okay, yeah, so when you move it to the test instance, it does show, for example, if there was test issues or if there is conflict in between the versioning between test and dev. Ideally, that should not happen by making sure that no one does changes directly in test, but at least the pipeline will flag it and actually will pause the change until you handle it.
Okay.
If that answers the question that was asked.
Hopefully it does, and if it doesn't, we will always be happy to circle back with you all individually, even for complex questions. In the meantime, I'll move on to the next one, and that's, could you share some examples of use cases where citizen development was used? And that might be a good one for Bramley.
Yeah, so there are actually a lot of use cases. In SASL today, we have what we call catalogs. These are the forms that you find on your service portal. And oftentimes users or business ask those forms to be changed. It could be a request for hardware, a request for software. you may be requested to, add additional items. So those are top of the use cases that we're looking at. They're getting a little bit more complex now as we move, to a full sort of portfolio. We have adopted, for an example, ITBM. We also are using resource management. We're targeting some of the forms in that space to also move those through production using DevOps process. So there's a lot of things that we want to achieve in SASL. But the idea, Maria, here, it's important because the concept of custom speed, it's a real one, right? It really doesn't make sense for a customer to ask for a form to be changed, which takes about 3 seconds or a minute, and it takes a week or two to put into production. It just doesn't make sense. So we want to make sure that we achieve the vision of customer speed.
Okay, thanks,
Yeah.
Bramley. Our next question, how do you handle multiple changes in this pipeline? Example, we have 3 changes pushed to test environment for UAT, but only 1 is ready for production deployment. How is this handled?
So in the pipeline executions, also you can add timers, for example, and you can do checks. So you can do, depending on certain criteria, you can make sure that you have some pauses times, and make sure, for example, that changes only deploy on a Friday afternoon or something like that. So these could be some of the solutions that could be implemented during a pipeline or during the whole DevOps flow.
Okay, and does Gus have anything to add to that, or is that a good enough answer to move on to the next question?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting case. I think what the asker is probably referring to is if you make multiple changes, but not everything is approved in a UAT yet, how do you select between those changes? So first of all, there is the concept of by using those commits, it's possible to selectively commit certain things and not commit other things yet. So that's the basis, but of course that is still in the dev environment. Then besides that, there is the possibility, and actually it's also a good idea, to split up your applications between sort of the processes. So you don't do one big application where you try to combine everything, because then you have a lot of different things that you need to be deploying bundled, but you want to segregate them in more individual, smaller applications so that you have the possibility to move things more selectively. Besides that, if you're making changes to multiple changes to like a single small process, and you want to move on some of the changes to production and others not, that is actually today one of the main causes of many issues in the deployments. So actually, you should refrain from that to begin with, because it's a very likely cause for issues. And if you want to be able to do everything automatically, those type of things that may cause those type of issues should be prevented. But if it's really needed, there is, as everything is handled through Git now, with the versions that you commit in Git, you could, of course, revert particular parts and create sort of a new version where only a single part of what you are moving on is being released rather than everything. But that's really to be done on an exception basis.
Okay, thanks, Gus. The next question is from Sunil, and that's, do we need to perform testing of this application when we upgrade ServiceNow instance? Probably for Lamia.
So the application for DevOps, I'm assuming that you are talking about. So the for DevOps is certified with ServiceNow, and it uses the ServiceNow DevOps application package that allows those webhooks and those integrations to be facilitated with the pipelines. So with upgrading the instance, it will follow the same steps that you would be following when upgrading your instance and checking the skipped records in the monitor check for that DevOps application. But so far we have gone through an upgrade, I think, at SASL, and we have not received any issues. And this instance actually that I demoed it on was upgraded 2 days ago. Also, we have not faced any issues.
Great. That's a good sign. Next question, I think it's the last one I have in the queue right now. How do you revert the change from the master branch? Example, a column add cannot be undone by just reverting a commit.
I believe Guus partially answered this question earlier.
Well, actually, so I think that there's two things. I think it's a very good question. I don't really have, we don't really have an answer to that. I haven't tried particularly reverting a column add, but this is something we could check. We know that when deleting things, this is of course a little bit of a different way and that these updates are handled in ServiceNow, that we need to set a set of properties to be able to track those deletes properly. So we could actually, it would be a very nice topic to explore how those deletes are indeed captured in Git and how then how that would work. I think it's a very interesting case.
Yeah, and if your commit gets blocked in the UAT version, you can also submit a new change from the dev, and that will be basically taking the latest change that you do. Yeah.
Okay, great. We did have one more question come in, and that's how can citizen development be used on historically grown instances where most of the code is in the global namespace?
Historically grown instances, can I assume that it's a very, very old, very old user of ServiceNow, which is nice. So you've seen the whole evolution of ServiceNow from the start. Most of the code is in the global global application, which is very good because then you just create scoped applications in the global app, and those changes are captured in that application that you will be committing, as I showed in the demo. The demo that I showed, the application is also under the global scope.
Yeah, so just to be even more specific, when you create a global scoped application, it's a little bit of a contradiction, but that's the name. We cannot help that. Yeah. You basically, it was sort of in the picture that you presented before as well, that you basically say, okay, so let's take an example. For example, the incident management form layout. Of course, that was always in the global space. And if we now create a global app for incident management, as soon as we make a change to that form layout of the incident management form, and we put that in that particular global app, we make a claim on the form layout of incident management. And from that moment onward, the form layout of incident belongs to the incident management global app. And then if you want to add it to another app, it can happen, but then there can only be one global app claiming that particular form layout.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I would encourage the audience, if you have anything else to submit in the chat, now's your chance. Otherwise, we'll wrap up today. And I want to point everybody to the top of the screen. The lovely gentleman speaking is Gus. And you can certainly reach out to us after the event if you want more detail or additional questions answered. But I don't see any other questions coming in, so we'll wrap it up. And again, we'll send you a recording of the session probably tomorrow. So thank you, Lamia. Thank you, Gus. And special thanks to Bramley, who joined us from SASL to share what we've been doing with this automated deployments tool at SASL and how that's helped drive their digital transformation. So I will close the event without further ado. And again, thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks for joining.